Phillies have now lost 7 of their last 8.
Harper suffered a broken left thumb, and the Phillies announced that he will be out indefinitely.
I'm running out of words to describe how bad the Giants are.
Is this rock bottom?
Don't call it a comeback.
Welcome to Don't Call It a Comeback. I'm Ryan Shazier.
I'm Dave Dameshek. What a week to launch a show about comebacks. So many stories. The Phillies rode their main man Bryce Harper's comeback all the way to the World Series, and the 6-1 New York Football Giants are having the biggest comeback season in the NFL.
Hey, Dave, you missed one. Taylor Swift is back.
Oh, 5-0 is a Swiftie. Who knew? We need to get your review of her brand new album. In the meantime, NFL veteran broadcaster Marcellus Wiley is here to get into the Giants, and Todd Zolecki of MLB.com is here to share more on the magical Phillies comeback run, and we're positively overflowing with show.
From Wondery, this is Don't Call It a Comeback.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.
What a pleasure to be here with you, 5-0, because you have lived one of the great comeback stories in recent memory. For those of you who don't know, Ryan's Pro Bowl NFL career with the Steelers ended on a brutal hit in Cincinnati, but he's the perfect co-host for this show because of his own comeback story that has him here with us as strong as ever.
So every week we spotlight inspiring, surprising comeback stories from the entire sports world.
Okay, 5-0, we teased it a little earlier, so let's get to it with the G-Men. It's been a rough decade for the Gents. The once storied franchise of Sims and LT, Manning and Strahan hasn't had a winning season since 2016. They've had almost as many head coaches as wins in that time. 5 head coaches in 7 years. And at QB, the heir apparent to Eli, Danny Dimes, seemed like a bust.
If you judge Daniel Jones by the content of his performance, you know what he should be doing right now? Updating his LinkedIn page.
By the end of last season, they looked downright hopeless on the field.
It's just like this riptide of gobbledygook.
I mean, I get the first one when you put yourself kind of backed up inside the 1 yard line.
I mean, this is sad.
I mean, that is just a complete lack of confidence in faith of your offense to be able to execute.
They fired their coach after last season and hired Coach Brian Daboll from Buffalo to begin the rebuild, a process they expected to take some time. But this year's players didn't get the memo, apparently. Their stud running back Saquon Barkley looks like comeback player of the year running with the ball, and their QB Daniel Jones is having the best year of his NFL career. Last week, he led them to their 3rd straight fourth quarter comeback win.
Lawrence in a shotgun, takes the snap, back to throw, steps up, fires it to the end zone. It's caught at the 1 yard line. Giants stand him up. He's not in. And the play's going to run out. The Giants stopped him at the 1 yard line. Holy cow.
So now they're 6-1 on the season and the comeback story of the league. Here to talk about all of it with us, veteran NFL broadcaster and host of the podcast More to It on iHeart and Dan Patrick Network, the great Marcellus Wiley. What's happening, man?
How's it going?
How you doing?
I thought the Giants were supposed to stink this season, and then they were going to get a new QB in springtime of 23 and start the comeback next year. What gives here?
I think what gives is unfair analysis or not deep enough analysis by the masses. You got to understand how this Tetris was layered. You have a Daniel Jones, you have a Saquon Barkley. But how often did you have them together at their peak powers? So I think that's the fatal flaw in all this analysis about the Giants is that they didn't have their 2 supreme offensive talents together for long enough to make that assessment. So once you start going down that slippery slope, all of a sudden the indictments come. Oh, Daniel Jones, I thought you were tremendous. You worked out with the Manning family. You knew all the secrets and tricks of the trade. But now you're just a bum. Well, if Daniel Jones could talk it like he really felt it, he would say, I'm not a bum. But if you take away Saquon Barkley, things are going to be different offensively. And I think vice versa, as we know about comebacks and Saquon Barkley getting the last laugh this year. But it's been a roller coaster ride, hitting the ground running and then having the injury. And then when you come back from injury, you're not fully back from injury, even though physically you may be deemed as able to play. mentally, you're so mindful of that injury every single play that you're never in sixth gear until like years later. So it's just great to see that now they have their two peak twin towers ready at their full power.
Marcellus, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm like, before you broke it down to me, I was like, man, I'm a Spurs fan. And the reason I'm about to tell you I'm a Spurs fan is this dude named Wembayama coming out. And we're winning right now. So I'm like a fan. I'm like, yo, what isn't this tanking season? You know, so like this is the same thing everybody's thinking about in New York. But with you actually bringing it together like that with Saquon not playing, with Daniel Jones, with them playing together, it does make a different dynamic because their team does play a lot better when they actually can have the run game in. I honestly think Daniel Jones is a great player, but it's a whole different level of pressure when you're a quarterback and you don't have a run game.
Oh, absolutely. Come on, man. Former defenders we are. We know how it goes. Let's take people all the way back to day one of training camp. Like when you go first team offense versus first team defense will smoke offense 9 out of 10 times on day one. Why? Because we're not an orchestra. We see color, we hit color, we just react. But the offense, they have to go out there and learn the instruments. They got to learn how to play together. They need the conductor and they need the quarterback and the running back to be in sync. Not us. We just Neanderthal and just knock somebody out, right? So then you forecast what that's going to look like. And you look at this team, without their offensive firepower, playing together, having chemistry, they're not going to be the same. They're not going to play up to their capabilities. It's just that simple. So defenses are going to be allowed to tee off on them. Mm-hmm. And that's what was happening. When you have a tremendous quarterback, but the running game is suspect, all of a sudden we crowd the box. All of a sudden we shrink the field. No. And we dare you to beat us as a quarterback. And you can't do it if you don't play complementary football. So to me, it was just like flawed analysis. I'm like, damn, I would hate to be judged how good I am when you take away half of my resources and then try to give me that judgment.
So apparently, Marcellus, you had him going about what, 12-5, 13-4, making a Super Bowl run here?
No
the way
way.
you're talking.
No
That's a little low. I was thinking 72 Dolphins. Nah, I'm just playing.
Oh, okay.
But,
well, no. What I do here, Marcellus, is something that has become over the last quarter century a requirement just to tick below superior athletic ability from all the Joe Schmoes like me out there, which is a chip on their shoulder, something to prove people wrong about. How much what does that impact things? Because every team does it, but why does it work in some locker rooms? The whole, no one outside this locker room believed in us.
You know what? It's so funny. I love that narrative because that narrative gains strength and it gains power and momentum when you're successful. But people don't really look at how many teams out there have a chip on their shoulder. But because they suck or because they lose, all of a sudden we don't talk about the chip on their shoulder. Dog, you know how many times I was so mad, pissed at my opponent, whether it was personal, bulletin board material, I'm playing my former team, I had a chip on my shoulder, and it was never a conversation unless we won. Other than that, I had to eat those chips, like they potato chips, right? Like, Marcellus didn't play well against his former team. What happened to the chip? The chip didn't work. So it's just funny how we let the results dictate the story. But in this situation, I think the Giants really are going with a momentum that is based off all the ills. I mean, this is a team that, in the last 9 years has only won over 6 games once. Yeah. So, they have been starving for a moment like this. And like anything, you can get some positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. But this team starting fast and hitting the ground running certainly is starting to create their own snowball effect.
I'm always a big player over coach, if chicken or the egg, big time sports guy. But obviously Dable has flipped a switch there and changed things. And specifically to go back to Danny Dimes, what are you seeing, Marcellus, in terms of X's and O's or otherwise that has made Danny Dimes present as a very different QB this season versus the prior ones?
When you're Daniel Jones, you've kind of already been through the fire and you know how hot it can get. And you still haven't been fully burned. So now It's not survival mode, it's thrive mode. And I think that's where he is now. He's like, oh, I've dealt with the New York media. I've been out here empty-handed. I've been out here without the proper resources. And now it's like, I'm still here. So now I could go from surviving to thriving. And I think that's what's happening right now. You're seeing the maturation of a quarterback who's taking his lumps and is now ready to dish them out.
Oh, dynamite stuff, Marcellus. I could go into a lightning round with you here. Actually, answer this question for me. You can go back and play for one of your teams. Bills, Chargers, Cowboys, or Jags. It can suit your purposes selfishly or benefit the team or both. Choose your one team, 2022, Marcellus Wiley, in his prime, ready to roll. X Factor.
Oh, man, easily. I'll be a L.A. Charger instead of a San Diego Charger. An L.A. native, now playing for his home team and didn't even have to go 90 miles down south to San Diego. I'll be right here. And if I were in my peak powers, I'd get some of that Joey Bosa money, too. It'd be silly out there. So I would love to play a top five, bro.
The new podcast, More to It, on iHeart and the Dan Patrick Network. Awesome stuff, Marcellus.
All right. Appreciate you guys. Have a great one, brother.
See you.
Don't call it a comeback.
Now, 5-0, our other huge comeback story this week comes from baseball. The Phillies stunk to start the season. They had a 21-28 record and were third in the NL East when they decided to fire their manager, Joe Girardi. It looked bleak in Philly, but then came the comeback.
There goes the runner. Harper slashes a base hit to left center. How fast can Real move down? He'll hit third and come home. The Phillies take the lead.
Right as it started rolling for the Phils, though, another setback. In late June, their best player, Bryce Harper, took a heater to the hand and broke his thumb. Almost immediately, the experts started counting them out.
The reality is that with Harper, they weren't good enough. Without Harper, he drove in or scored 75 of the 352 runs that they've scored this year. He's their biggest run producer, and he's out.
But despite the pundits talking, the Phils kept winning. Then in the playoffs, like a real-life Roy Hobbs, Harper returned and went on a comeback tour, and the exclamation point was smashing the game-winning homer in Game 5 of the NLCS that sent the Phils back to the World Series.
Harper hits one in the air, left center field, back it goes. Harper, the swing of his life.
Oh, grand stuff. Maybe a little bit better if Harry Callis had called it, but let's not nitpick. Here to talk us through Harper's Rocky story, Phillies beat writer for MLB.com and author of the best-selling biography, Doc, The Life of Roy Halladay, Todd Zolecki.
Thanks for having me. It is a fun time in Philadelphia right now.
Well, you wrote the story on the Phillies NLDS with San Diego about Bryce Harper's comeback from the broken thumb. Some really nice storytelling from you. How did he carry this team to the World Series after taking off, a big chunk of the middle of the season there?
So, yeah, he came back and everybody just assumed he was going to pick up where he left off. He was having one of the best seasons of his career. The first couple of games he did well, and then he went into this really bad funk. I mean, an un-Bryce Harper-like hitting slump. And so you're kind of wondering going into the postseason what exactly was going to happen, because if Bryce doesn't hit, the team generally doesn't go very far. But then the postseason started. And in Game 2 of the National Wildcard Series, he had a big walk in Game 1, a big ninth inning comeback. Game 2 of the Wildcard Series in St. Louis, he hit a home run to right field. And he just kind of took off from there. And he is one of those guys. You hear a lot about athletes being called red light players, guys that step up in the big moment when the big cameras are on, the national stage, the stage becomes bigger. And he really is one of those players. And he is having one of the best seasons of any baseball player in postseason history. And that's not just like hyperbole. I looked at his OPS the other day. It's right now, it's like the 8th highest of all players in any single season in postseason history. It's been absolutely incredible.
Todd, what's crazy to me is that when people are trying to make a comeback, they normally are like hoping that a comeback can happen. But this is something that you kind of foreseen. Like you seen that this was possible. How did you know that something like this can happen?
I think it's just because of the caliber of the player he is and just the will to be great. This is somebody who, when he is struggling, takes it very, very hard and very personally. And sometimes that can work against him, but it also becomes a motivator as well. So I think for Bryce, he came to Philadelphia in 2019, signed a $330 million contract. And there were a lot of expectations that came with that. And he talked about winning a World Series, having a parade down Broad Street in Philadelphia. And I think he takes that personally, and he takes that responsibility very seriously. So when the playoffs started, he basically went to another level, and he got locked in. And every time he came to the plate in a big spot, it was like, you can't leave your seat. You can't go up and grab a beer or run to the bathroom when Bryce Harper's hitting. That would be the dumbest thing in the world to do, because he can always do something special. And that's what he did on Friday in Game 5 of the NLCS.
I'll tell you, I'm with you, Todd. Underdog stories are great and they're fun to write about. But to me, the guy who has the weight of being supposed to do it, he's supposed to carry the day in the biggest spots and actually comes through, those are the best stories in sports. But 5-0, when that main man has to sit down, why is it that some teams are able to fill in the gaps there and other teams just fall on their face?
I remember when Le'Veon went out for a period of time in the 2016 season and the 2015 season, and D'Angelo had to step up. The one thing that's really awesome about pro sports is the next man mentality. And the difference between some teams and a lot of other teams are that the guy behind the big star always feels he's just as good. Like, I'm good enough to be that guy. And, D'Angelo stepped up in that moment. But the teams that fold when it's next man up, they might feel that they're that guy, but they're not. Like, they can't handle the load of actually dealing with that much pressure. Taking 30 carries a game, batting over 300, that is very easily to say, easy to do on a video game. But actually, when you have that pressure on you in those big moments, that's when those stars arise, like Bryce Harper. So I feel like that's the difference between when some teams fold and some teams don't, is because the next man up, they understand, hey, I just have to do the best I can. And when my teammate comes back, I'm still value, and then now it's going to, we can go over the top because he's back. But when that next man up doesn't hold that same value, that's when you see, most teams start to tank.
And I will say this real quick to add on to that. It's a great point, because after the night in San Diego, Bryce Harper breaks his thumb. We go into the clubhouse, and it's, you expect it to be a Morgan there, but there's Kyle Schwarber, a couple of the other veteran players with some of the younger players, and they're just kind of sitting at this table in the middle of the clubhouse playing cards. And we asked him the next day, what were you talking about? And he's like, we were just telling guys, listen, nobody's Bryce Harper. Nobody tried to be Bryce Harper. Everybody just be yourself. Do what you can. We can't replace him. Let's not try. Just do what you can. And it kind of created this calm mentality, the next man up mentality, like next man up, but don't be Bryce Harper, be Kyle Schwarber, be Alec Bohm, be Matt Vierling. And I think that's why this Phillies team kind of stayed afloat while Bryce was on the injured list.
Well, you kind of just touched on it there a little bit, Todd. Ultimately, Bryce Harper is the straw that stirs the drink. But what are the other factors in a practical sense that made it so that the Phillies could actually get to October and play meaningful baseball?
Yeah, they had some other veteran players, Kyle Schwarber, who helped the Cubs win a World Series in 2016, their first World Series in like 100 years, over 100 years. And that's a guy that has played with pressure before, the pressure of an entire city trying to break a curse. Rhys Hoskins, who's put up some big numbers over the years, Nick Castellanos, JT Realmuto. They had other kind of star-like players. And then, baseball being baseball, it's not a one-man team. It's not, the Lakers lost LeBron, season's over. Bryce Harper only bats 4 or 5 times a game. So you can have other people step up, and that makes the pitching more important. That makes the fielding more important. And you had other players on that team step up. Zach Wheeler on the mound, Aaron Nola on the mound. The bullpen stepped up and pitched better. So actually, when Bryce came back in August, at the end of August, they were playing pretty good baseball at the time. And, he kind of had to slide in there, and they struggled a little bit in September, but they obviously made the playoffs, and here they are going to the World Series.
I just love the story of the Phillies because it just reminds me of so many amazing comeback stories that happen through sports history that they end up winning championships. And this kind of brings championship DNA to me, what the Phillies are going through.
Yeah, I mean, it's the city of Rocky, right? I mean, underdogs, Philly loves its underdogs. So, the excitement that Harper created with that home run, I've seen a lot of big home runs. I've been covering baseball since 2003, but to have and Phillies manager Rob Thompson said this. He's like, the superstar came and showed up. He's like, I've seen a lot of stars in the postseason not show up. And, this guy was on Sports Illustrated at 16 years old. He was like the next coming. And so to have the next coming then actually deliver in that moment, it's almost hard to believe.
Yeah, like I say, the underdog at least doesn't feel probably the tons of pressure that Bryce Harper does. Like I call it the curse of Sposta. Coming through in that spot is just marvelous stuff. Your entire life amounts to, at least on a professional level, to that moment, and you do it. It's remarkable stuff. Shazier and I know all about coming through in the big. Well, okay, at least one of us does. But from your side, Todd, your story begins with Harper in San Diego after taking the hit from Blake Snell, apologizing to the skipper, and so begins this the comeback story. Did you get a vibe from Bryce or anyone else that the completion of that circle, doing it against the Padres, made it that much sweeter?
Bryce will never acknowledge that. He likes to say, I don't look into the past. I don't think about those things. But I do have to think that it was a little sweeter beating the Padres because, as you said at the very beginning, when he broke his thumb in San Diego, everybody was like, well, that was fun. Season's over. They're not going to win. They're not going to make the playoffs because how can they win? How could they possibly win without Bryce Harper? Nobody knew if he was going to come back. They hoped he could come back, but nobody knew. And it's like, well, gosh, can they even play halfway competent baseball without their superstar while he's out? And so they did. And I think it was a nice little exclamation point to get to the World Series by beating the team that could have, in a sense, ended their season.
Yeah, times two. And instead it's 1-1. And I think Phillies are happier where they are than where the Padres are at this point. 5-0. What is it like, though? And Todd, certainly I'm interested in you taking a bite of the same apple here. But 5-0, what's it like when, certainly mid-season, that you change 2 months in, Girardi has shown the door. How does that turn a clubhouse around, a locker room around? And what's your assumption that as the big star goes out, a new skipper goes in there, that this team or any team would have the resolve to put together a win streak of some sort?
To me, I think it really matters when you bring somebody else in because it's a whole different way of handling the team. Like I even talked to Jim Tressel today. I know he's in a whole different sport.
Name drop.
But me and him just even talked about just coaching and how you deliver a message to your team and how that can affect how your team plays. And to me, it's crazy because like a coach, their mannerisms, how they respond to situations can just be, uplifting to a team, or it can bring the momentum down and the morale down. And, with Thompson coming in, he made those guys believe in the talents that they had, even without their best player. And so many other managers in that situation, they probably been like, all right, let's see what we have here. We might have to make a trade. We might have to do something and just try to push it off to next year. But Thompson came in and said, hey, I believe in this squad. I understand what we can do. I understand we have a key piece out, but he made them believe in all sports, and Ty can tell you this, in all sports, if you just provide confidence to your players, confidence is the key to winning any sport. And once you start building momentum and confidence, it can be the worst team in the MLB. It can be the Pirates. If they have all the confidence in the world, they can beat anybody they're playing.
Now you've gone too far, 5-0. I got your larger point, but then you got into some ridiculous territory there. I have to put a stop to that. But yeah, Todd, how say you about how galvanizing the flip from Girardi to Thompson was for that clubhouse?
It's a great point because the manager, the coach, the head coach, they set the tone in the clubhouse. And so the thing that I've heard about Rob Thompson and why he had the interim tag removed from his title, now he's the manager, got a 2-year contract extension, is because he showed a lot of confidence in that clubhouse, and he never panicked. Like, I've gone into the manager's office after a loss this season where the Phillies get crushed, and Rob will have almost a smirk on his face and go, "Hey, how you doing? How you doing?" You know, kind of like, we just got our brains beat in, guys, but it's okay. He doesn't say that, but it's kind of like that vibe he gives you, you know? Whereas Joe Girardi, it looked like he was going to lose his house tomorrow. It's like, I'm on the streets tomorrow. Like, you could see the pained look on his face. And I noticed it, and you know the players noticed it as well. Whereas Rob was like, all right, we got our brains beat by the Diamondbacks of all teams. Or, you know, we got swept by the Cubs coming out of the All-Star break. You know, whatever. And so he never panicked. And I think that rubbed off on the players, and that made them believe that they could get past Bryce Harper's injury and keep winning.
The book is the biography, Doc, The Life of Roy Halladay by Todd Zolecki. Todd, enjoy all the good times going on out there in Philly. And should the Eagles get to the Super Bowl, make sure they wear that 1960, that nice Kelly green. It looks so nice. But in the meantime, 5-0, and I need them to lay down for the Pittsburgh Steelers so they can be relevant the rest of the way. Can you do that?
Yeah.
I don't know, guys. You guys might be in trouble.
Yeah, I think this is the one we pull off.
Is that right? You're going to say that. Big comeback for the 2022 Pittsburgh Steelers. You heard it, Todd Zolecki. Your time is limited. Enjoy it while you can.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Don't call it a comeback.
All right, time now for some comeback stories in the news you may not have heard about. This is the Check Down. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs went down 10-0 early against the Niners on Sunday, but they came back and won big. Mahomes improved his record in games where he trailed by 10 or more points to 13-9. Why can he pull off big comebacks so routinely, 5-0?
This is something that we're still trying to figure out. Patrick Mahomes, he's so good that he breaks all the stats. So it's like trying to go back in history and see guys that are as good as Patrick Mahomes when it comes to coming back. It's hard to really pull it up. But Patrick Mahomes, I know his winning percentage is like 50 or 60% when he's behind by 10 points, something crazy. But one thing about him is he's very poised. He understands his assignments and he understands his team. He understands who can do what. He always understands the mismatches that he has with Travis Kelce on linebackers and safeties. And I feel like he always put his team in position and he never feels like he can lose a game. And when you have that type of confidence, you can win any game that you play in. And I feel like that's why the Chiefs have the ability to win every game that they're in, just because Patrick Mahomes understands, hey, when I'm down, I'm not scared. I'm not nervous. I've came back before. I know who to give the ball to. I know who I can trust in. And it's like the Golden State Warriors when they used to win a bunch of championships, and even though they won one last year, but even before that, they could be down 25, and everybody was like, "Oh, well, that's only like 10 points to the Warriors." And that's kind of how the Chiefs are. For you to beat the Chiefs, you have to be up 20 points, and you still might lose.
I know people are scoring more points across the league in the 21st century, and obviously you played with number 7, Ben Roethlisberger, one of the great guys at rallying a team in the fourth quarter. Another number 7, John Elway's up there, Peyton and Brady. But I don't think the league's ever seen anything like Patrick Mahomes bringing his team back from double-digit deficits, and not just once, but it seems like it happens pretty regularly. All right, let's move on. Another guy who's just coming back, putting together a video that he entitled, Don't Call It a Comeback. DeAndre Hopkins played his first game since week 14 of last year, and he came back strong if you watched the game. 10 receptions for 103 yards. Actually, that happened even if you didn't watch the game. Hopkins' season ended on an injury last season. Then he missed the first 6 games of this one because of a PED suspension. How should the PED suspension change how we view this return?
See, I know a lot of fans are not going to be a big fan of him taking PEDs, but I look at it completely different from an athlete standpoint, is because with him coming off an injury last year, he probably used them to help him with recovery and not actually performance enhancing. Like, if somebody is completely healthy and they just fail a drug test for PEDs. Now you're actually just trying to get an advantage on somebody else. But when somebody is going through an injury, obviously you shouldn't take them at all. But I feel like he tried to take something, obviously, which was illegal. You should not do that. But I don't think we should view him like he's Mark McGuire or anything like that, because I really feel like he's doing this to be able to get better at, trying to heal faster so he can get back into the process of playing again. But to me, DeAndre Hopkins is the top 3 receiver in the league, top 5 receiver. We have a lot of good receivers in the league. And he showed it once he came back. In his first game back, 14 targets, 10 receptions, 100 yards. He might be comeback player of the year, and he's not even played the whole season.
Last thing, 5-0, Taylor Swift, you mentioned it at the very top of the show. She's back on the airwaves, releasing her 10th studio album, Midnights. You played football for a long time. Out of all the teammates you've ever had, who was the biggest Swiftie?
I'm going to be completely honest. I've listened to a lot of music in the locker room, And I don't think in my whole time of playing that I've heard Taylor Swift. I might have heard Shake It Off. And we was like joking around. But I can't really think about it who's a huge Swiftie. I've definitely heard at like cookouts and things like that. Like Cam has a cookout at his house all the time, and his wife seems like a Swiftie. So we might have heard it at his cookout. Or my wife, she likes Taylor Swift, so I would listen to it when I'm in her car. But it's not something that really goes, hey, I'm putting this on a playlist in the locker room type of thing. It's more that's more something that I could see that you're doing in your car.
I don't know what that attack's about, but I will tell you this. If I were a pro football player and I enjoyed Taylor Swift or otherwise, I wouldn't just listen to it. I wouldn't hide it. I would make it public. I happen to know that Hall of Famer Howie Long liked to listen to Enya or Sade. I think it was Sade before games. And you laugh at that, but then he dominates you. Wait, the guy who was listening to Sade just embarrassed me? Doubly embarrassing. You understand what I mean?
No, I have songs that I would listen to before games. It just wasn't Taylor Swift. Like I would listen to Chris Brown sometimes before a game, or Justin Bieber, or my favorite song is by Cameo.
How's it go?
And It Tastes Like Candy. So I used to listen to that before a game. That's basically as close as Taylor Swift as you can get. That's R&B, old school, type of very soft music. I'll listen to that before every game. But I'm not saying that I'm highlighting Taylor Swift. A lot of guys, I wouldn't say they're Swifties. Like even when Taylor Swift came to Pittsburgh, I don't remember a lot of guys that went to a concert unless they went with their fiance or girlfriend.
I remembered what a disgrace watching the black and gold players put their arms around Justin Bieber. I didn't care for it. What I did care for it, you say Sweet Like Candy. Great first run here, 5-0. Feel good?
It felt great. I loved it.
All right, you know what? Let's come back next week. That's it for the inaugural episode of Don't Call It a Comeback.
Make sure to follow, rate, review, and check us out on YouTube to see the full episodes of the show. See you all next week.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.